Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's One Piece Treasure Cruise video, we are going to take a look at all of the available arena units, and we are actually going to make a tier list out of them, a priority tier list specifically, based on how good they are, how often they are used, and how you should prioritize them if you decide to get them, especially if you are a new player and you miss all or majority of them. I want to emphasize that we have 15 total arena units, but only 14 of them are available through the Recollection Archive, because the last ever arena unit, who we saw get released in June, Katarina Devon, hasn't yet been added for some reason. Maybe because arena is too grindy, I don't know. But we are going to include her in this video anyway, because she might be added in the future, so might as well. By the way, I also have a video with multiple teams on how to farm each one of these units, and you can find them on the channel. But without further ado, let's get to the tier list. I believe the tiers are pretty self-explanatory, and we are going to talk about the units in chronological release order. The first arena unit was Kamazo. I will place Kamazo in the low priority tier, mainly because he removes debuffs for 4 turns and not 5 or more, especially now in Kizuna specifically, because that is the content where we can technically freely make teams. We see debuffs being applied for 5, 6 or even more turns after level 30, so only having 4 turn removal is not the best, and it is a combination of burn and damage reduction, which is also not the best. He can also give a universal ore boost though, so that definitely helps him a lot in this tier list. It's also worthwhile to mention that with his support he can give an 1.3 times color affinity boost to driven units, but he can only be attached to Kid. And then he also cannot be blown away if you unlock his Limit Break Sailor ability. Next up we have Franosuke, immediately to the high priority tier. This unit is awesome, and that is not even because of his special ability. I will be honest, the special is fine. Just like Kamazo, he can remove 4 turns of debuffs, but this time we have a better combination of Despair and Attack Down removal. And then he can reduce defense and also give a conditional attack boost. The thing with Franosuke though is that his support is insanely good, because he can be attached to Zoro, Usopp and Robin and remove 2 turns of attack down when the supported character uses their special. I am using him all of the time. He is exceptional with Robin and Jinbe being able to remove a total of 8 turns of attack down alongside their special, of course. In addition, he can be attached to more Robin units to make their utility even better. He can also be attached, as I said, to Zoro and Usopp, but Robin is the one that has the utility units most of the time, at least out of these 3 Straw Hats. Even if you don't want to bother to fully limit break him, max him out and max out his special ability, I would highly advise you to max out his support. Next up we have Arena Drake. I will place him in the low priority tier, because Drake is one of those units that might help you, but once in a blue moon. He's pretty specific, and he does have a multi-layered special, but it cannot be relevant all of the time. So he can remove damage nullification for 2 turns, not a lot of units do that, and then threshold by 4. He can also give a color affinity boost, and then it depends on the color of the rest of the units on the crew. If you have 3 or more Psi, you get bind reduction and a chain boost. Then, if you have 3 or more Q Dex and Int, you get a full board of matching slots and a chain lock. So you can see the different situations he can help you in, but at the same time he cannot be a consistently helpful unit in my opinion. And even if his special is helpful, he might not have color advantage over the enemy, because strength is not as a color mentioned in his special. An interesting thing about him though is that with his support he can give you a universal color affinity boost in the final stage of the adventure. The thing is that he can only be attached to strength powerhouse units and no one else. Bonakichi is up next. I will also place him in the low priority tier. The consistent things he can do is give you end of turn damage and also threshold. The thing now with the rest of his special is that he can delay and reduce defense. Not through immunity of course. And then, depending on how many enemies are on the stage, 1 or more, he can either give you a delay conditional attack boost or a defense down conditional attack boost. But if his debuffs to the enemy do not go through because of immunity, that conditional attack boost won't help you anyway. His support, even though it is kind of unique, it's not really that good either. Up next we have Kawamatsu, who I will place in the medium priority tier. In my opinion, his special on paper is not bad. He can remove 3 turns of paralysis and attack down, manipulate empty block and bomb slots into matching and also lock them, which is pretty nice, and then he can give an attack boost to slashers and free spirits for 1.75 times. The interesting thing is that after 2 turns, he can give an ore boost to the same classes for 2 times. So if there is a mechanic where an ore boost is not allowed or interruptible, then Kawamatsu can help. Yes, his utility is not that good, especially at 3 turns, but that is probably not going to be the main thing you use him for. And even if you do, maybe you can add a paralysis removing support or an attack down removing support in your team in order to help reduce it further. Also, as a support, he can be attached to Oden Raizo and Okiku and remove 2 turns of paralysis when you activate their special. The downside here is that if you do not want to activate the attached character's special, then Kawamatsu cannot automatically activate and remove paralysis. Next up, we have San Juan Wolf, who to be fair I will place in after everything else. He's not completely horrible on paper. He can remove chain lock and chain coefficient reduction by 5 turns, something that is not the best anymore, and then he can give a color affinity boost to Powerhouse and Driven, and then after 2 turns, an ore boost. He can also provide a bit of healing, but to be fair, I have never used this unit, or if I have, it is in very specific occasions after he came out. With his support, he can be attached to Blackbeard and Shiryu, and when the attached character activates a special, he removes 2 turns of chain coefficient reduction and chain lock. Something that hasn't been relevant in a lot of situations, to be honest, and he has the same downside as a support as Kawamatsu does, of course. Then we have Young Shinobu, who I will place in low priority. She is one of the few units in the game that can remove Crew's positive effects, so if you have a low ore boost or a low attack boost attached to you from a preemptive of an enemy boss, she can help, but other than that, she can reduce bind and paralysis for 3 turns, not the highest of removals. Could still maybe be helpful, of course. She can do end of turn damage for 3 turns to the enemies, so maybe she can help going through resilience. She can also provide an attack boost for everyone, but only at 1.75 times, which is not that great nowadays, and then if your HP is over a specific threshold, she can essentially get special cooldown reduction, but in my opinion that mechanic is not good. Overall, I think she is very niche, so you are very rarely going to use her, if ever. Next up, we have Mihawk, who I will also play in low priority. Mihawk here can remove defense up for 5 turns and give you a 3 times chain lock. And that is pretty much it. He does have the same or a similar mechanic as Shinobu, where if a requirement is met, then he can give special cooldown reduction to himself, but to be fair, that was a pretty miss ability from Bandai back then. And for his support, he can be attached to Zoro and Shanks, and he can actually reduce enemies' resilience by 2 turns, but the supported character needs to use an attack boosting or ore boosting special, so it's not going to come in handy in lots of situations. Maybe he can be used in a stage 2 of Kizuna, for example, as I used him recently, to remove defense up and give you a bit of extra damage, but overall, not an amazing unit. Up next, we have Asura Doji, who is an interesting case. I will place him in medium priority. He can reduce silence on himself by 6 turns, which is very good. And then with his stage 2 special, because his special has 2 stages, 1 and 2, with stage 2, he can reduce defense of all enemies by 100%, which is good. He can reduce 6 turns of silence on everyone, which is awesome, and then enemies threshold by 6 turns as well, which is absolutely great. And then he can actually boost the attack against enemies with reduced defense by 2 times and give you base attack boost for Q Slasher and Powerhouse characters by 500. His special actually seems amazing for a free-to-play unit, and it is, but the special cooldown reduction you need for the second stage is 24 turns. It is so high, even in Kizuna you might not be able to get it if you do not stall in stage 1 on the turtles. And then for stage 1, he does not reduce defense anymore, even though he does give the conditional attack boost, it's not as great. And the debuffs are not reduced by 6 turns and not even 5 anymore, but only 4. That's why I simply cannot place him in a higher tier. Up next, we have Caesar, who I will place in low priority. He has double special activation, which is actually awesome. And he can reduce Bind and Despair for 2 turns, so with 2 specials by 4. Not amazing, but not bad. Then, because he's Caesar, he has to have a poison mechanic. So he will poison all enemies and then give you a conditional attack boost, but the thing is, he gives you a higher conditional attack boost the more times you have activated his special. With just the double special activation, the conditional attack boost is not great. And of course, he cannot poison through immunity. He's not an incredible unit because he is very niche and his support is also extremely generic. Next up, we have Crocodile, and I will be 100% honest, I forgot he existed. Therefore, I guess I have to place him in after everything else. He can remove chain coefficient reduction and blindness for 7 turns. A lot of turns, but not a great combination of debuffs and something you probably are not going to want to use a special for. Then he can poison enemies and also give a color affinity boost to int units. And finally, if your captain is int, he can make the type slots matching for int units. So not a great special for a not so great unit. Next up, we have Arena Luffy, who I will place in medium priority. This unit is actually not anything crazy, but he is a Luffy who can actually remove poison completely, so he can even make poison slots matching. He can make all of the block slots into matching and give you a chain lock of 3.5 times at stage 3 of his special, and it is 14 turns. This is not an Asura Doji situation. At 3.5 times for a free-to-play unit, the chain lock is very good, and because he can provide utility as a Luffy, that is pretty useful, especially if more debuffs are present and he can be attached with a helpful support, since Luffy has a plethora of them. He can also deal damage as a Luffy, so maybe even more supports are available for him. So even though the special itself is not insanely good, the fact that he is a Luffy unit definitely makes him better. Let's also not forget that he can give access to superclass and super type abilities. Queen comes up next, and I will also place him in the medium priority tier. He can deal 15 hits with his special, which can actually reduce hit barriers. Not going to be relevant all of the time, but good to know. He can reduce burn for 7 turns, but that won't be relevant a lot of the time either. And then the rest of his special has an HP requirement, and if it is fulfilled, then it can protect you from defeat, manipulate block slots into matching, and give a conditional attack boost, which is fine. But to add to that, one of the main reasons for me he is in medium priority and not lower is because he is one of the very few supports in the whole game that can remove burn, and he can also remove it for 3 turns, which is actually pretty high. He can be attached to Jack, Kaido and King, and it will be activated when the supported character uses their special. Even though that's not going to be helpful all of the time, when you need it, if for example there is burn in one stage and the boss also revives, so the burn will apply no matter what and you need to remove it or be able to survive it, this Queen support can be helpful. He's definitely not as good as Franky, but he can be labeled under the same category, where if you cannot bother to max him out, just get him, max his support, and have him available in your box in case you find yourself in the situation where he is helpful. Next up, we have Hawkins. I will place him in low priority. He's nothing special, he doesn't have a specific support, and his special is extremely niche. He can remove slot bind by 2 turns, one of the very few units, if not the only one in the game that can do it, but to be fair, it's not that good. Then he can inflict all enemies with increased damage taken for 3 turns for 1.5 times, but it doesn't go through immunity of course. And then he can give end of turn damage, ranging from 1 to 6 turns, depending on how many enemies are on the stage. You can understand his special is extremely niche, and in my opinion, it's not a great unit. But at the end of the day, he is a free-to-play unit that can apply increased damage taken, so that definitely helps his case. And finally, we have Katarina Devon, the arena unit that is actually not available in the Recollection archive, and that is unfortunate because I will place her in the high priority tier. She's actually pretty decent because she can remove 6 turns of Threshold, give 1 turn of special cooldown reduction to Powerhouse and Driven, delay all enemies by 1 turn, not going through immunity of course, and give a conditional attack boost against delayed enemies. Lock your orbs for 1 turn, and if your crew has an attack boost, she boosts said attack boost by plus 0.25 times, which for a free-to-play unit is actually very nice. She doesn't have anything else special about her, but in my opinion, the 6-turn threshold removal in combination with the attack boost buff can definitely be helpful, even if you do not need anything else of the things she does. And that was my tier list for all arena units that have released so far. Are we going to see more in the future? Who knows? But to be fair, going through them, we did not have tons of great arena units either. But still, Arena did give us content to play throughout the month. If you enjoyed this video, definitely leave a like, I would really appreciate it. And if you like tier list videos in general, I have more on the channel for priorities on different free-to-play units like Kizuna or Treasure Map ones. You can check some of them by clicking the videos on the screen right now. For more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, subscribe to the channel, it is absolutely free. And as always, thank you so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.